This is video 2 of week 4. So how can we study language acquisition? The first thing that we have to decide is which kind of data we are going to accept as good foundation for our observations. The first kind of data that we have had throughout the history of the field, it comes from diaries. These are just the researcher themselves making notes by hand as they were observing children speak. And many times, the first set of data that we have came from researchers that were also parents, and especially in the field of multilingual language acquisition. So the father or the mother was playing with the child or being curious about the development of the child, and they were making notes about what they were observing every day. As soon as they observed something new, they would note it down, and so forth. And they were linguists, or psychologists, and then they made databases that were observational in a very naturalistic setting. The good thing of this is that, of course, them being parents, for example, they had a privilege first raw experience of how the children were developing language, and they didn't provoke it in any way, at least not consciously in most times. So they could really make a very faithful account of a very natural way in which their children were acquiring language or languages. So those were the early diaries that we have. Now, once the field started getting more momentum, researchers started designing experiments in which they would target a specific phenomenon in the development of the language. For example, they wanted to know question formation, or they wanted to know tense development, or any kind of linguistic item that you want to target. And then they would design experiments very much like you design experiments to find out any other psychological reality or behavioral response in humans or non-humans. And here I have, just as a sample, I have included a link to an experiment so that you get an idea. The advantage of experiments is that you can be very targeted, so you can have a more controlled environment so that you target the specific phenomenon that you are observing. The disadvantage, of course, is that the experiment has to be well enough developed and designed to avoid any interference of a factor that you might not have anticipated would play a factor. And also, of course, the problem with the experiment is also that it's typically made in a somehow artificial setting. So the children, in this case, that come might feel a little less comfortable. So the challenge for the experimenter is to create both the experiment that successfully isolates the variable that they are testing, and to make the environment comfortable enough for the subject to be able to deliver a naturalistic like data. Okay, so after I told you about the child's database, which is next, then you can click on the link, and then you can just have a little bit of a sense of what that entails. Now, the third piece of or source of data that we have is precisely this child's database. This child's database is just a database itself, so it doesn't elicit data. It's just an internationally established database in which experimenters from all over the world can upload the result of their experiments and just as raw codified data, and that's for everybody to access. So you can then, you don't need to produce your own data. You can just go to this available data and then look for what you're looking for. So what I would like to do now is to show you how this database looks like. So if you click on the link, this is what you see. You go to the child's database and you get all of these little windows. Now, if you go to either the new browsable database or the old browsable database, it doesn't really matter, and then you click on it, it takes you to the data that is available in that particular place, right? So then you can see here in this corner, you can see languages classified according to either their family or according, like you have Romance, right? Or according to the language themselves, a particular language. Some grouping might make more more sense than others, and so forth. Then some languages, even though they would be part of a family that is also there, they might be isolated just because of the amount of data that you have, because there have been many experimenters have worked on them, and so forth. Okay, so the first thing that you can do, I mean, you can read the instructions here, but I leave that to you. So you can just go to any kind of language that you are interested in, and then if you go to Romance, you have all these languages. Of course, Spanish, as you saw, has its own category. So let me just go to one that you are very unlikely to click, so that I don't interfere with your choices. If you go to, say, Catalan, then you have all of these databases, really. And you can go to any of them, and then you access the files themselves. And if you look at the files, here it tells you that there's only transcript of the files. Okay, so you click at any of them, and this is what you get. This is the transcript of the file. This is a very early file, as you can see here in the date, is 1992. So you have a transcription that would not be accepted maybe today, because it is not very strict and it doesn't have a lot of information. But this is an early file that you have here. What I want you to see is at all this information that you have in this first block here. Okay, so the important thing is that you have the file name, the languages. The languages here is just monolingual Catalan. Okay, and then you don't have any media. In others, you will see that you have an audio file or you have a video file. You have the date in which this was made, and then don't worry about these things, right? I mean, it's just here maybe the activity is a context of playing with toys. Okay. Now here, where this says the participants, you get everybody who is in this particular file. You have the child. This is always the child, and is the role of this participant, which you will have then later here. So look at number 3. Here is where the child speaks, right? So it says no. So the child is the target child. So is the one that is the focus of the study. And then she is identified as Julia, is a female. Obviously, these are all code names. They don't need to be the real names. The language is Catalan. And the age of the child is always coded in the same way. So the first number before the colon is the age in years. So this child is 1 year, 7 months, and 19 days. So it's 1 year and 7 months and a half, almost. Okay, so and that's always codified in the same way, and of course that's extremely important because you are looking at age being a factor in language acquisition. Okay, the other participants are just MAR, which is the mother. And of course, it doesn't matter what sex or age that person has or what name it has, because it's not the focus of the study. And apparently there's a PAR, who is the father, who also is not named because it's just the father. And the language is characterized, though, because it's part of the input that the child is receiving. So that is relevant potentially. But of course, age and sex of this person is not important. And then here you have actually the transcript, and this is a very cleaned up transcript of the file. Okay, and then if you go to the end of this same child, you will see that if it was 1 year, 7 months, and 19 days before, now you have all this progression until the same child, Julia, is 2 years, 6 months, and 25 days. Okay, and that's the relevant thing. All of these should be more or less the same. And here the mother and the father is still a toy play situation. So that's how you have this child's language documented from 1 year, 7 months, and 19 days to 2 years, 6 months, and 25 days. Okay, so this one is one example. And then if we go to another example that might have, I think this might have, I know these ones are also, let me see, I want to show you one that has also, let me see if we go to some other, yeah. So here you see that in this one, you have a different situation in which you have the same language. In this case, it's a bilingual situation. You have Catalan and Spanish. Okay, those are the coded languages, and it has a video. And it says unlinked because it's just put there, and it's not necessarily, it's just an illustration, not necessarily linked to all of the transcript. Okay, it's a more modern file. That's why they were able to produce a video, and it's also toy play. And here the setting is a little bit different. So you have still the chai one, that's the target child. Okay, here she is, I say she because it says sex female, so she's unnamed. She's a bilingual child, and it starts, this database, it starts with 1 year, 7 months, and 16 days. Very similar to the other one. Now, in these particular files, you also have the mother, and you have two sisters, apart from the investigator. Okay, the sisters are identified by name, but they are not identified by age or sex because they are not the target of the investigation. And here you can see behind my head, here you can see the video itself. So you can click and you can have more of an idea. Oh, can you click? Well, you can click and then you can have more of an idea of the setting, and then you can see the child. I like that because then you first you hear the child directly, which helps with the phonological development. Sometimes you have that also without having the video. You have an audio file, but also especially because you keep reminding yourself that you're dealing with a human being, that you're dealing with a person, and it gives you also, if you're not very familiar with how a child looks like of that age, it gives you some reference. Okay, if you go to the last one of this particular child, you see that it stops at this is not 22 years of age. This must be 2 years of age. There must be a mistake there, I suppose. We only have, yeah, this must be 2 years of age. There must be a mistake, right? So watch out for those. Let's go to this one maybe if it's more reliable. Okay, here you don't even have. Let's go to this one. Sometimes I like that I'm encountering these problems because you see that it's not straightforward. So you will have to always check out on the data itself. Here is 1 year, 11 months, and 6 days. Okay, so this is the child's database that you can access by clicking on the link that I include in the PowerPoint. And this is the database that I want you to use for the homework for this week. So I want you to take one of these databases to select a language and a child and some files, and then look at them and contrast what you see in this codified raw data and what I'm going to tell you in the schedule in the rest of the presentation for today. Okay, so this is the basis for your homework, and the explanation of what you have to do is more detailed in the explanation document that you have on Nestor. Okay, so I'm going to stop here so that you can first click at that experimental experimental example or little explanation that you have there in the PowerPoint, and second, so that you have a clear reference of what you need to do for the child's database.